Once again, breaking news on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com as five-star cornerback Dijon Lee has committed to the University of Alabama. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside BOL senior recruiting editor Andrew Bone. And of course, down there in the center square, we have our publisher, Mr. Tim Watts, saying, guys, this is a big one. There's been a clamoring, it seems, for five stars in this class. And I'd say, Tim Watts, this is a big answer to that question with more on the horizon.
Yeah, I think this is big for several reasons. First of all, Alabama staff's put a lot of work into Dijon Lee, a lot of personal relationships there. Kalen DeBoer, obviously Courtney Morgan. Again, we go back to the four guys that Alabama mentioned coming, arriving, I don't want to say off the bus, but off the plane. This is a guy they mentioned, Dijon Lee. You look at him, he's over 6'3" as a cornerback. Probably not that familiar with him if you're a Bama fan at the time, but it didn't take long for him to become a very popular target. And again, the five-star, everything goes into place. But I think it's more than just the five-star of the ranking. Again, that still to be determined. But the fact you're getting a quality guy, highly recruited off the class you had last year, you've already got Chuck McDonald. I mean, I think Mo Lindquist is California dreaming. He's got a lot of California kids in that secondary, and they're all very close, which is going to develop a good bond, obviously.
So, Andrew, give us sort of the path to Dijon Lee to Alabama. I know, again, a national prospect. We're talking about a top 30 overall player. Georgia was heavily in that mix, I guess. But just how Alabama came to this conclusion with such a gifted prospect.
Yeah, I think Dijon was probably the first defensive recruit that was offered by this new Alabama staff when they first arrived. I think the first overall player was Jackson Lloyd, also a California kid who committed to the Tide a couple weeks ago, and now is Dijon Lee committing to Alabama. But they offered him pretty quickly, and a lot of that had to do with the relationship with Courtney Morgan. Uh, he was previously offered by Washington, took a trip to Washington last year, so that relationship goes back a while. And when Alabama first extended that offer back in late January, Lee had never been to Tuscaloosa and came out and said, "Alabama's in my top three already because of how much I love Coach DeBoer and Courtney Morgan." So you knew if he finally made a trip over to Tuscaloosa, they were going to have a realistic chance to get him. So finally made that trip in April, loved it, raved about it, and then he came back for the official visit this past weekend, which we knew that if Alabama was going to get him on campus that final weekend, they were going to have a great chance to close him. But there were some other schools that were heavily involved. Took an official visit to Washington, went to Texas and Texas A&M, but the real threat was Georgia. Georgia had been named as the leader in his recruitment during the spring. They made a big move with him. He also attended their spring game. But then he made a trip to Alabama, after that weekend, after the spring game weekend. Had a lot of one-on-one time with the coaching staff, and I think that weekend really kind of sealed the deal for Alabama. We started seeing some predictions come in after that trip, and they were able to kind of hang on all the way until the finish line. Obviously, you got to continue to recruit them all the way until the early signing period. But this is a big win for Alabama. You got to give a lot of credit to even the California guys that are on campus now. Xavier Brown helped recruit them. Damani Jackson, Chuck McDonald, who committed in early June. They're also good friends, and Chuck was recruiting Dijon as well. So huge win there for Alabama and getting Dijon Lee on its commitment list today.
Tim, it just seems like the hit rate from these official visit weekends has been astounding. Obviously, you can only sign so many guys, and they've brought in a lot of guys on these official visit weekends, but uh, a really impressive effort all around, starting with Kalen DeBoer, but certainly moving throughout the coaching staff, the support staff. That's maybe one of the most, I wouldn't say shocking aspects of this first full run through a recruiting cycle for Kalen DeBoer, but it's been very sort of definitive in terms of how they've answered some questions here.
I think the official visits are just the nails. I think that everything else started in April. I think it started on the phones. I think it started with relationships. I think it started with offers. I think that's where all of it began. Then you get them on campus. Obviously, did a good job on the unofficial visit. So I think when they're heading into these officials, so a lot of these guys, Ben was already in pretty good shape. Now there are guys they just knocked it out of the ballpark with. Keelan Russell, Chuck McDonald, those guys that went in there and did that. And when they did, Those are big home runs. But seeing Dijon, that was a long, that's kind of the long recruitment. That's been going on quite some time. And again, like Andrew said, Georgia at one time was named the leader. We never heard that. We never felt that. We felt that Bama was always in a good shape. Not that Georgia's not a danger in any recruitment, but we feel like Alabama had done a really good job. And then, finally, got it home on that last official visit.
So let's go to the huddle tape, guys, if you will, and let's check out Dijon Lee playing that corner position for Mission Viejo High School out in Southern California. Gets it going. You'll see him right here on the right side of the screen in red, kind of a man coverage look, and he's running the route, right? Look at him in coverage here, running the route. Then you'll see at the close that 6'3.5" Andrew Bone comes into play. Is boy, it's nice to have that kind of length at that position, isn't it?
I met Dijon Lee earlier this summer in Nashville at the On3 Elite event, and a lot of times when you see these height and weights on players, sometimes you're like, all right, we still want to see him in person, see if this actually matches up. I mean, he is a big dude. I was really impressed with how tall he was. Like you said, almost 6'3.5". Filled out pretty good, 195 pounds already. So, and he's an outstanding athlete. He's a star track player, runs the 110 hurdles, long jump, triple jump. So he's got a lot of athletic ability, and obviously he can flip those hips pretty easily.
Yeah, and here you see him, Tim. He's at the top of the screen into the boundary. And this team's running kind of a flood concept into the boundary with three receivers. And again, the length. He's got his guy underneath. They're trying to high low him a little bit, but he's able to, with the eyes to the quarterback, react to the throw, and then the length once again to be able to make that kind of pass breakup. All the attributes that you like in a corner, and some of the concepts that I think we're going to see with Kane Womack defensively, he's already accustomed to there with a pick six for Mission Viejo.
I think a guy with that size is going to be trouble in any kind of zone defense because he can kind of read short, long. I mean, we saw Richard Sherman had a great career with that. He's not going to be a 4-4 guy, similar to like Chuck McDonald, who's got that legitimate track speed because he's got to get those legs out and going. But when he's running, he's striding. There's nobody catching him. His catch radius, if he's a wide receiver, would be huge. It's going to be the same on the defensive side of the ball. And again, there's a lot when you're scheming for him. If you're a high school coach, you're probably trying to stay away from that side of the field because he brings so many different angles to how he can affect the game. He also has some very physical tackles. He will light you up. I mean, if he gets a hold of you, he'll light you up on those short passes he reads.
What I like about his huddle tape, Andrew, maybe more than anything, is that on a lot of these, you'll see players kind of highlight themselves before the snap. Well, he did it right there. Of course, I said something, and then he does it. But it's as if Dijon says, "No, you'll know where I'm at when the ball snapped," and you do right there. He comes off a guy, is able to help and recover in a coverage and make a play. Just very impressive stuff here.
I mean, it really is. I mean, he's got, like we talked about. I mean, he's got great field vision. Great size. Tim mentioned, he's got wide receiver skills back there playing corner. I know he's a corner, but you could also potentially see him, playing that free safety spot potentially in the future. I mean, this is just a tremendous athlete. He had 55 tackles as a junior, but what was even more impressive was 13 pass breakups. You're trying to avoid this guy, but he continues to make plays, each and every game. He didn't have a ton of interceptions. I think he only had 2, maybe 3 interceptions during his junior season, but he seemed to be all over the football.
Tim, it's a good point by Andrew in terms of potential position versatility, safety, husky. This guy with this kind of size kind of falls in line with what we've seen from this staff, right? On the defensive side of the ball in terms of guys that could help at multiple spots.
Yeah, he's got position flexibility, but what I like about Dijon is there's not really one like him on campus. In fact, there's not many like him on any campuses. I mean, again, this is not a 6'2" exaggerated to 6'3". He's closer to 6'4" than he is 6'3" probably. So you've got all that working for you. And again, I mean, that's a guy you can just move around. And he's going to, again, you drop him back in zone. There's going to be, there is no outside of weightlifting, bench pressing, there's no sport where long arms don't come in handy. So you think of him like that long arm defensive back. He's going, he doesn't have to have the 4.4 speed because he can close out, reach out, knock a ball down. He does that several times on his highlight tape. But overall, just a huge win. Again, a national guy that national teams were recruiting, full court press, probably could have called anybody and had an official visit and an offer. And again, we're just seeing the early work pay off for this Alabama staff. Courtney Morgan, again, with a great relationship, had a really good story, Joseph did, with his relationship with the grandfather of Dijon that showed you how well he connects with people and what kind of people person he is. And they said the same thing about Kalen DeBoer. So an A+ win here.
Yeah, Dijon Lee. You think about the potential with he and Zay Mincy. Boy, you could have a couple, couple of big corners in that secondary, big players in general. Andrew, we talked about this sort of progression of playmakers on the defensive side because we spent, and understandably so, a lot of time on offense, but again, at some spots where you think dynamic prospects and playmakers, looks like Alabama has checked that box one more time.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this class is really coming together on the defensive front, defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary. I mean, this is an outstanding secondary class with, two West Coast guys in Chuck McDonald and now Dijon Lee, Zamir Smith out of Maryland, Derek Smith, number 2 player in the state of Alabama. So it's an outstanding secondary. You kind of waiting to see who else may fill some spots, especially at the safety position. Ivan Taylor's been a guy that we've talked about a lot, throughout this last month. And Naheem Alford, I mean, that's a guy that is an in-state kid that a lot of people have talked about. That they're kind of hoping that he might flip from Ohio State. I think he's pretty solid with Ohio State. Alabama, had him for an official visit, and he might come back for a game or two this fall. But I think Alabama right now, they're very happy with what they've been able to do in the secondary. And if it ends the way it is right now at the cornerback position, I think they'd be pretty pleased.
We'd be pretty pleased, by the way, if you would go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a like if you don't mind. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. And as you see right there, scrolling at the bottom, we've got that new subscriber special at BamaOnline.com. $1 gets you 1 month. Come on. Never been a better time to jump on board at BOL. Hang out with us on the roundtable, our premium message board. That's where nuggets from these guys drop. If you love the nuggets, like we all do, that's where you're going to get those from Joseph Hastings, Tim Watts, Andrew Bone, the rest of our staff, right there at BamaOnline.com. Tim Watts, give us something to take us out of here as 5-star corner Dijon Lee commits to the Crimson Tide.
All I gotta say is yes. Yes, Kalen DeBoer knows how to recruit defense. Yes, Alabama is focused on the defense. In fact, at some points, we're worried about the offense. I mean, the defense, they've been out, rocking and rolling here. But obviously, it's important. It's kind of funny because that's been one of the things recruited against Alabama is that this Alabama staff doesn't care about defense. I mean, I think they're saying because Kalen DeBoer is an offensive minded guy. Well, Kane Womack isn't. Kane Womack only cares about the defense. So Freddie Roach, all those guys, they don't care. Mo Lindquist, they like the defense too. So this staff definitely knows the focus and where how you win an SEC championship is on defense, along with the good offense, obviously.
I think you have to give a lot of credit to guys like Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson as well, 2 West Coast guys. First, really their first semester at Alabama. Those guys helped recruit Dijon Lee, Chuck McDonald. Told them a lot of good things about Alabama. These are guys who've just been around the staff for the last 5 months, and they just raved about them to these guys. Helped recruit. These are guys who could have easily left after Nick Saban retired. They decided to stay, and now they've become really big recruiters for Alabama. So I think that says a lot, not only about them, but says a lot about this coaching staff.
And for more intel and insight into the commitment of Dijon Lee to the Alabama Crimson Tide, again, BamaOnline.com is where you need to be. We scratched the surface pretty good here on the YouTube channel, but if you want true in-depth coverage of Alabama team and recruiting, BamaOnline.com is the place to be. Andrew, Tim, thanks for taking the time, guys.
Thank y'all.
So for Andrew Bone and Tim Watch, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. And until next time, so long, everybody.